Tonight I'm trying to figure out the deadwood. The deadwood is the piece that runs from where that level is laying from the transom going up on top of the keel, and then it's got to come up, I'm figuring about 18 inches, and then come all the way up into the centerboard trunk about 11 to 12 inches. There's no pattern for this. You got the plans, and I've already built the mold for the keel, and there's some concern that my angles may not just be exactly right even in the keel mold off of the plans. I think I'm very close, but I almost wonder if I should just worry about getting the deadwood done after I've got the keel poured, because at that point I should be able to draw out the triangle roughly that the deadwood is, that would exactly match up and mate up with the keel. The only problem with that is the keel is going to be 600 pounds, and at that point the boat will have to be upside down. So I started thinking about it, and I'm supposed to do this out of Douglas fir. We can learn a lot from the plan if we just look at it and think about it a little bit. Okay, here's the deadwood here. This piece here is the stern post, which the rudder attaches to. The stern post is not really part of the deadwood, although it'll be added onto the deadwood. This is to be made out of white oak. And I've been looking around, and I think I've got a nice piece of white oak that's going to fit that. Then the deadwood, you can see there it says D fir, Douglas fir. And the deadwood then comes, and this is lead down below here, which is the same as this end of the keel mold. So if I move this plan, you can see this mark here. This was my hinge point when I built this. And so that goes straight up. And so that's the stern, that's the after end. That distance from where the curve of the bottom, where it matches up to the curve of the keel, which is that part going back, to that mark that we see down here, right there. From there, all the way to the end of here is about 36 inches. So I know that that's one of the dimensions from where this touches down at the keel, the oak keel, here, because the deadwood fits in between the lead and the oak. Confused yet? All right, let's point out a couple of things. The plan says that this is a scale of 1.5 inches equals 1 foot. So I took a decent measuring piece and I measured from here back to where the oak is, so this little dot here, and that's 4 inches. On the plan paper it's 4 inches. Well, we know that 1.5 inches is a foot, so 3 inches is 2 feet. So I kind of did some math down here. 3 inches is 24 inches of actual size, and then I've got 1 more inch, which is 2/3 of a foot, or 8 inches. So I know that this in reality should be 32 inches. Now what threw me is that I measured from here back up to the end of this thing, and it's about 36 inches. So I'm thinking, well, why am I off 4 inches? Well, I'm off 4 inches because the stern post, the white oak that's going to attach on there, that's about 4 inches. So that makes up my 36. So if I measure from here all the way back to the very back, now I'm 36 inches. So I feel good about that. The next thing I did is I took the protractor and I extended these lines up on the plan. See, I drew that all the way up there. Put the protractor on there, and it turns out that that's 130 degrees from here to here, 130 degrees. So I've got a piece of plywood, just real thin plywood, and I drew out, came out to 32 inches down here, and this thing's not going to be long enough. 32 inches, it came down 32 inches, and then I took my protractor and I made it 130 degrees here, going up. And the other thing I figured out now is that this back line that goes along the stern post, that one there is 2¼ inches, which equals 9/4. Now the other thing I figured out is that 1/4 inch equals 2 inches. So, because 6/4 is 1½ and 1½ is a foot. So, a foot divided by 6 is 2 inches. So, since I know that this is 2½ inches from here to here, 2½ is 9/4 or 18 inches. So when I'm drawing it out on here to try to get a pattern, I've got 32 inches coming from the end here, 32 inches back to my point, then a 130 degree angle, and this isn't big enough to get 18 inches. But I need for this to go on up here, come on up and be an 18 inches length. So I'm just going to have to get another little slightly larger piece. Then the only other thing that I'll have to figure out is what, and I kind of started drawing it out on paper first. The only other thing I'll have to figure out is what this curve looks like here, which is where it actually mates up with the yoke on the bottom. This curve here going back. And probably the only way to do that is going to be to get the two hard angles, my 32 inches by 18 inches with the 130 degree angle, and then just put it up there and take a pencil to it and try to draw that curve out. Should give me a pretty rough idea what the triangle basic dimension of the Deadwood should look like. Now the only other thing will be the thickness, but that's relatively easily figured because I know my width of the keel all the way up, and I can measure the inside of the mold and tell, because remember that narrows as it gets closer to the bottom, and this is upside down, as we remember. So that's the only other thing, is how thick is this dude supposed to be. But that'll be relatively easily figured. Certainly easier to figure than this. The other thing I did just to double check is I looked at the stern mold, or the lead mold, and I measured from here down to here, and that was 9 inches on this, and this is a different scale. This scale is 3 inches, where does it say? 3 inches equals 1 foot, right there. So if it's 9 inches, that's 3 feet. So that's where I know that this 36 inches matches up with my 36-inch measurement that I had down to that mark. So it tells me that I should be pretty close. The other thing I did is it's got a stern line in there. I extended that out and measured that, and lo and behold, this angle from here down to here, 130 degrees. I've got it upside down there because I had to turn it over because I couldn't think of it being upside down. I had to turn it upside down so it would be right. Holy smoke. I hope this helps somebody. Sure would be nice if they just gave you a pattern of the Deadwood, but I know why they don't, because if you're making your own mold for the keel, for the lead, the chances are that you could be off, and then you got a little half-inch gap between your keel, lead keel, and your Deadwood. It'd be a mess. And that's why I think I'm going to try to get as close as I think I can, and then make it oversized, and then that way, if I got to trim it down to get it to fit in between the lead and the oak keel, that's going to be the way to do that. All right. Good luck to everybody.